In today's video, we're going to be abusing a bulk rare from Ikoria called Slitherwisp. This is a 3-mana 3/2 with Flash that whenever you cast another spell with Flash, you get to draw a card and your opponent loses a life. While this is a powerful effect on a 3-mana body that can get bolted, it's hard to protect it. But with the new printing Aaron and Giada from Marching Machines, a Flash archetype might finally be possible. The reason is because Giada allows us to cast spells with Flying or Flash off the top of our library, meaning that now we can essentially have 6 copies of Slitherwisp. And when looking at our deck, we have many Flash spells like Leyline Binding, Subtlety, Dress Down, Spontaneous Mutation, and Snapcaster Mage, which means this deck can get an insane amount of value, while also playing a good control game plan with free spells in it like Force Negation and Subtlety. And when looking at the rest of the list, we're playing powerful spells like Thoughtseize and Drownalock to support this Flash sub-theme. And if you're doubting Slitherwisp and this Flash deck, we're going to be taking this to a positive win rate in a modern league. Match 1 we're on the draw and hands a mole. Our 6 is also a little too weak, so we're going down to 5. And our 5 is perfectly acceptable. Putting back Slitherwisp and consider. Opponent goes turn 1 lounge. We draw a Snapcaster and fetch Shock to Thoughtseize. And we'll take their expressive iteration. Opponent plays a Foothills. We draw a Slitherwisp for turn and play Otawara. Opponent plays a Dwarven Mine for turn. We draw a Delta and play it out. Opponent plays a Savai Triome and do a Teferi Time Raveler. In response, we'll cast our Slitherwisp. And they bounce it back to hand with Teferi. We draw an Island for turn. We'll play our Snapcaster Mage targeting Thoughtseize and Thoughtseize the opponent. And we'll take their creativity, then play out an island. Opponent ticks up Teferi and plays out a Dwarven Mine. We draw Castle Vantress, play it for turn, Drownlock the Dwarf token, attack Teferi for 2, and they Leyline Binding our Snapcaster Mage. They tick up Teferi and play an Arid Mesa. We draw a Ketria Triome, cast out a Slitherwisp, and play our Ketria Triome. And on our end step, they Leyline Binding our Slitherwisp and make a 1/1 with a Dwarven Mine token. Opponent ticks up Teferi, attacks for 1. We draw a Dress Down for turn. We'll cast it out, cycling, drawing into a Snapcaster Mage, which we sadly have to play out. Opponent down ticks on Teferi, bouncing it to our hand, plays a Dwarven Mine, getting a 1/1, attacks this down to 8, then cast out Creativity for X equals 2, getting 2 Archons, and opponent's got us. So let's get on to sideboarding. We're going to take out 3 Spontaneous Mutations for Flusterstorm and Hollowed Moonlight. Game 2, we will keep our 7, play turn 1 Delta. Opponent goes turn 1 Mesa. We draw Giada for turn, we'll play Hollowed Fountain, holding up Dress Down and Snapcaster Mage. Opponent shocks into Steam Vents. On the end step, we'll cast a Dress Down, drawing into another Subtlety. We draw a Watery Grave for turn, we'll shock it in, passing back. Opponent plays a Scalding Tarn into a Wrenn. In response, we'll flash out a Slitherwisp, then pitch out a Subtlety, triggering Wisp and drawing a card and making the opponent lose a life. And Subtlety resolves, putting Wrenn on top of the opponent's deck. We draw Thoughtseize for turn, we'll attack in for 3. And on our end step, they shuffle away their Wrenn. Opponent misses their land drop, and we'll flash in Giada at the end step, drawing a card and making the opponent lose a life. In response, they cast a Leyline Binding, taking out our Slitherwisp. We draw a Consider for turn, we'll fire off a Thoughtseize, and they Spell Pierce it. We'll pay for it, and they Spell Pierce it again, countering it. Then we'll attack in for 2, opponent's down to 9. Opponent casts out Teferi, we will force it, pitching a Force. We draw Watery Grave, we shock it in, attack the opponent down to 7. Opponent misses land drop again, on their end step we'll Consider, and they bolt our Giada. We will bend the Thought Scour, drawing a Drown, then cast out our Snapcaster Mage and Consider again, and they Spell Pierce that. We draw Polluted Delta, we'll play that and attack in for 2. Opponent casts another Teferi, we will Force Negation this, then opponent plays out a Stomping Ground. Draw another Drown for turn, attack opponent down to 3. Opponent casts out a Fable, we'll Drown and unlock that. Draw an Island for turn, attack the opponent down to 1. The opponent scoops him up, let's get into game 3. Game 3, our 7's a little too weak, so we're mulling. Our 6 is more powerful, and we'll put back an Otawara. Opponent goes turn 1 Mesa, we go turn 1 Swamp into Thoughtseize, and we'll take the Teferi. Opponent shocks and a Steam Fits it to a Wrenn. That's so good. And we'll Force Negation, pitching Shadow of Doubt. We draw a Subtlety for turn, and then we'll cast a Surgical, taking out their Scalding Tarns. Then play a Hollowed Fountain for turn. Opponent plays a Dwarven Mine, we draw another Solitude, and play out Delta. Opponent does nothing on their turn, we draw Rafine's Tower and play it. An opponent casts another Wrenn in 6, and we could Subtlety this, but that just does nothing. They tick up, getting a Mesa, and they play out the Mesa for turn. We draw a Flooded Strand. On our end step, they get a 1/1 off the Dwarven Mine. Opponent ticks up with Wrenn and plays down a Mesa, attacks us down to 16. And on their end step, we'll run out of Subtlety into their Lightning Bolt, and they do use the Bolt, killing our Subtlety. We top deck a Thoughtseize, we'll fire it off, and looking at their hand, it's just too powerful. We'll never win this game, so we're gonna scoop them up here. Let's get on to match number 2. Match 2, we're on the draw, and our 7's a keeper. Opponent goes turn 1 Saga and an Ornithopter. We draw a Mutation for turn, we'll play out Flooded Strand. Opponent shocks in a Hollowed Fountain into a Sigardazade. We'll Force Negation, pitching a Mutation. We draw a Hollowed Fountain for turn, and we'll shock in a Watery Grave. Opponent floats a mana off a Saga, grabbing a Hammer and shocking a Hollowed Fountain for turn. They play out a Stoneforge. In response, we'll Dress Down. We draw a Shadow of Doubt, then they cast out a Sentinel. We draw a Thoughtseize for turn, we'll fire that off, and we'll pay the 1 for Sentinel, and we'll take the Stoneforge Mystic, then shock in our Fountain and Mutation the Esper Sentinel, making it a -3 power. Opponent attacks in with everything, putting us down to 12. And we top deck a Slitherwisp, we'll hold that up. Opponent plays an Inkmoth Nexus and attacks in with Stoneforge Mystic. We'll cast out our Slither Wisp and go to blocks. And they Blacksmith Skill their Stoneforge to keep it alive. We draw a Drown, we'll attack in for 3. Opponent plays a Plains and attacks in for 1. And on their end step, we will Thought Scour, targeting ourselves, drawing into a Scalding Tarn. And then we'll cycle our Shadow of Doubt, finding Subtlety and a Ketria Triome. Play out our Triome and attack in for 3. Opponent's down to 9. Opponent plays out a Stoneforge Mystic, and we'll evoke a Subtlety, drawing a card off a Slither Wisp, drawing a Mutation. An opponent puts the Stoneforge on top of their deck. Then an opponent attacks in for 1. And on their end step, we'll cast a Leyline Binding, drawing into another Slither Wisp, and we'll take out their hammer. We draw a Giada for turn and play out a Tarn. Then we attack the opponent and they chump block with a Sentinel. Opponent casts out another Stoneforge Mystic. That resolves and they grab a Cauldra. They activate Stoneforge Mystic, putting it in Cauldra. Then they attack us for 5. We flash in a Slither Wisp, drawing a card and making the opponent lose a life. Then cast a Mutation targeting the Germ, drawing 2 and taking opponent down to 4. We draw a Delta for turn, then cast out a Giada, drawing another Slither Wisp. Then we fetch with our Delta and see a Binding on top, which we'll cast, killing the opponent, drawing 2 more. That was a sweet win. Let's get on to sideboarding. You're going to take out 4 Force Negations and a Shadow Doubt for Cunning Nightbonder and Dress Downs. Game 2, we keep our 7. Opponent goes turn 1 tapped Hollow Fountain, we play a Delta and draw a Tarn. Opponent plays a Saga and 2 Stoneforge Mystic, grabbing a Colossus Hammer. We play out a Delta and draw a Dress Down. Opponent plays another Saga for turn and attacks us down to 18. On their end step, we'll Thought Scour ourselves, drawing another land. We draw a Drown and play a Tarn. On our end step, they make a Construct, and in their main phase, they make another Construct. And before they fetch out an artifact, we'll cast a Dress Down, killing their constructs and drawing a card. Opponent plays an island and attacks us. Draw a Thoughtseize for turn, we'll play a Tarn, fire off a Thoughtseize, and we'll take their Spell Pierce. Opponent makes another construct, and in response, we will consider finding a Snapcaster Mage, which we bin. And before Saga pops, we will drown and lock one of the tokens. Opponent finds a Springleaf Drum and then casts an Ornithopter, then runs out a second Hammer. We draw Mutations for turn, playing out Delta and holding everything up. Opponent plays out another Stoneforge Mystic. We let that resolve, they find a Cauldra, and then put it onto the battlefield. They attack us for 5, and we will cast a Leyline Binding, taking out the Cauldra. Draw a Consider for turn, and we'll hold everything up. Opponent plays a Marsh Flats into a Pure Steel Paladin. We'll cast out a Subtlety, and opponent puts it on top of their deck, and then immediately fetches. Weird. And on their end step, we'll consider drawing into a Wisp and a Castle. Opponent does nothing on their end step, we'll cast out a Slither Wisp. We draw a Flooded Strand, we play that out. Opponent casts out a Pure Steel, and we will cast another Subtlety, drawing a card off a Slither Wisp, and opponent puts it back on top, then casts out another Hammer. And on the end step, we'll cast a Mutation, cycling it for a card. We draw a Nightbonder, and then we'll attack in. Opponent chump blocks with an Ornithopter. Opponent casts out Pure Steel Paladin again. In response, we'll cast a Nightbonder, drawing into a Thought Scour. Then we'll Thought Scour ourselves, finding a Snapcaster Mage, and then we'll cast a Snapcaster Mage, drawing a card off of a Wisp and making the opponent lose a life, and we'll target Drown Lock with our Snap, then countering the Pure Steel Paladin. We draw another Nightbonder for turn. We cast that out. Opponent's down to 5, and we draw another. And before we can do any more, the opponent scoops them up. Let's get into match number 3. Match 3, we're on the play, and we keep a risky hand. We'll go turn 1 Strand. Opponent shocks in a Tomb into a Wild Nacatl. We draw a Subtlety and play a tapped Grave. Opponent shocks in a Steam Fence and attacks us for 2. Then casts out a Territorial Kavu. We draw a Snap and play out a Castle. Opponent goes to combat, attacking us for 6, and they loot away an Invasion of Tarkir. We're down to 11. Opponent plays a Heath, and on their end step, we'll cast out our Wisp. We draw another Snap for turn. We'll play Plains, passing back. Opponent goes to combat, attacking us for 6 and looting, discarding a Tarmogoyf. 4 blocks, we'll flash in a Snapcaster Mage, drawing a card, and opponent loses a life. Drawn into a Leyline Binding. Then we cast Mutations on the Nacatl, drawn into a Thought Scour. And then we Thought Scour ourselves, and opponent has a Stubborn Denial for that, killing the Nacatl and chumping the Kavu. Then opponent casts out a Sign of Draco post-combat, and we'll evoke out our Subtlety, drawing a card off of Wisp. Going into another Wisp, oh baby, and they put the Sign of Draco on the bottom. We draw a Force for turn, we'll cast out another Wisp and 2 Mutations. Then we'll shock in our Fountain and cast Mutations on the Kavu, drawing 2 cards, and opponent's down to 7. Then we'll attack in for 3, opponent's down to 4. Opponent plays a Sign of Draco into a Leyline Binding, and we draw a Binding for turn. We'll cast out a Binding, drawing into a Thoughtseize, taking out their Leyline Binding. And yes, I did miss lethal, oops. So we cast out another Binding, opponent's down to 1, and we'll take out their Scion. Opponent plays a Nacatl into a Tribal Flames, we will Force Negation that. They play out a Heath, and in our upkeep, we will Castle Vantress. And we see a Snapcaster Mage, which should do it. We play out Flood Strand, get an island, then cast out a Snapcaster Mage. Opponent loses 2 life, and we draw 2. Let's get on to sideboarding. We're going to take out 2 Giadas and a Shadow Doubt for Blossoming Calm and 2 Dress Downs. Game 2, we keep our 7. Opponent goes turn 1 Temple Garden into a Nacatl. We draw another Leyline Binding for turn and play out Delta. Opponent plays a Heath and attacks in for 2. And in combat, they fetch out a Zygoth Triumph, and we just take 2 instead of 3. We draw a Drown for turn. We'll play Delta and hold up our Binding. Opponent shocks in a Steam Vents and cast out a Scion. In response, we'll fetch out a Triumph and have a 1-mana Leyline Binding on the Nacatl. We draw a Hallowed Fountain for turn. We'll shock it in and hold up Binding and drown. In their upkeep, we Leyline Binding their Scion, and in response, they cast a Leyline Binding, so we'll Force Negation, pitching Snapcaster Mage. Opponent has a Flusterstorm, which counters our Force, and they Leyline Binding our our Leyline Binding that has Wild Nicottle. And on their end step, we drown and lock the Nicottle. We draw a Consider for turn, we'll shock and grave, and hold up Wisp and Consider. Opponent cast a Leyline Binding, we'll Consider in response, spinning a Thoughtseize. They take our Binding, getting Scion back. We draw a Thought Scour for turn, we play Castle, then Thought Scour ourselves, drawing into a Strand. Opponent dashes out a Ragavan, attacks us for 6, and we're down to 6. Ragavan gets a treasure and exiles our Thoughtseize. Opponent casts out our Thoughtseize, and we'll cast our Wisp in response. Then opponent plays a Plains into a Rest in Peace. And on our upkeep, we activate Castle, putting Snap and Hallowed Pound to the bottom. And we draw a Thought Scour, and with the writing on the wall, we'll just scoop it up and get into game 3. Game 3, we keep our 7. We go turn 1 Strand, and opponent's also in a mold of 6. Opponent goes turn 1 Heath. We draw a Snap for turn, and we'll shock into Hallowed Fountain, holding up Leyline Binding. Opponent shocks into Sacred Foundry and casts out a Scion, and we'll Leyline Binding the Scion. We draw a Drown for turn, we'll shock into Grave, holding up Drown and Consider. Opponent plays a Flooded Strand into a Kavu. We Consider in response, drawing into a Teferi, and we try to drown the Kavu. Opponent fetches up a Steam Vents and Stubborn Denials our Drown lock. We draw a Water Grave for turn, we'll cast out our Teferi, bouncing the Kavu and finding a land. Opponent casts out the Kavu again and bolts down our Teferi, then plays a Temple Garden into a Wild Nicottle. We draw a Force for turn, we cast out our Snapcaster Mage, getting Drown back, then killing their Kavu, and playing out a tapped Watery Grave for turn. Opponent attacks us for 3, we're down to 11. We draw a Drown for turn, we'll attack in for 2. Opponent goes combat, attacks us for 3, we're down to 8. And on their end step, we'll cast out a Slitherwisp, draw a Dress Down for turn, we'll go to combat and attack them for 5. Before damage, they path our Slitherwisp. In response, we'll drown that. And in response to that, they bolt our Wisp. So in response to that, we evoke out our Subtlety, drawing a Scalding Tarn, and in response to that, we cast out a Dress Down, drawing another card, making the opponent lose another life, drawing into a Leyline Binding. And in response to that, we cast a Leyline Binding. Opponent's down to 5, and we draw a Thoughtseize. Then the stack resolves, we draw into a Watery Grave, Subtlety goes onto the battlefield just as a 3/3 flyer, and our Slitherwisp dies. Then opponent takes 2, down to 3. Opponent untaps and bolts down our Subtlety. We draw a land, we attack the opponent down to 1. And opponent takes the draw steps and scoops him up. Let's get into match number 4. Match 4, we're on the draw, and we got a Molar 7. Our 6 is much more powerful, and we'll put back a Leyline Binding. Opponent goes turn 1 Mire. We draw Snap, we'll shock and Watery Grave and Thoughtseize the opponent, and we'll take their Expressive Iteration. Opponent plays out a Bauble into a Sacred Foundry. We draw a Tower, we play that out. Opponent plays a Scalding Tarn into a Swift Spear, and they attacks for 1, we're down to 15. We draw a Slitherwisp for turn, we play out our Flooded Strand, find an island, then cast out our Snapcaster Mage, flashing back Thoughtseize, and we'll take their Unholy Heat. Opponent cast out an Ending, killing our Snapcaster Mage, triggering Prowess. They mutagenic their Swift Spear, then attack us and bolting us before damage, putting us down to 3. We draw an island, we play that out, holding up our spells. Opponent attacks in with Monastery Swift Spear, we cast out our Wisp, go to block the Swift Spear and eat it in combat. An opponent drew a mutagenic growth, we have to force negation that and trade off. Then they buy Giganta to hand. We draw a land for turn, we'll play that out and hold up Giada. Opponent cast out a Sprite Dragon, then attacks us for 1. We get to cast out our Giada and eat this in combat. And our top card's Drown, pretty good one. We draw that for turn, seeing a Delta on top. We attack the opponent for 2. Opponent plays a DRC, in response we fetch, seeing another land on top. We draw the land, seeing Force on top, so we will Drown and lock the DRC, and then play our Hallowed Fountain, attack in for 2. Opponent cast out an EI, then played a Swift Spear for turn, and exiled a mutagenic growth off of the EI, so we're just dead. So let's get on to sideboarding. We're going to take out Shadow of Doubt, Dress Down, and 2 Force Negations for Flusterstorm, Brutalities, and a Blossoming Calm. Game 2, we Molar 7. And we're going to have to go down to 5. Oh my god, our 5 is so bad. So down to 4. Okay, I guess we're keeping. We'll just put back some lands and keep a Blossoming Calm. We'll go turn 1 Flood Strand. Opponent goes turn 1 Mire into a Bauble. We draw a Drown for turn. We'll play out Delta. On our end step, they crack the Bauble and fetch away their top. Opponent plays out a Swift Spear, shocks into Sacred Foundry into another Swift Spear, then casts a Mistress Bauble, triggering Prowess on both. An opponent attacks us down for 4. On our upkeep, they Bauble us. We'll fetch our top away, grabbing an island. We find a Thoughtseize. We'll fire that off, and I guess we take the EI. Then we'll play Triumph and pass. Then opponent top decked an EI anyways, and we'll just scoop them up here. We're too far behind. Let's get into match number 5. Match 5, we're on the draw, and our 7's too weak. Our 6 is much more powerful. We'll keep putting back our Consider. An opponent goes turn 1 Power Plant into a Sphere, and they were on a mold of 6. We draw a Thought Scour. We'll go Swamp into Thoughtseize, and we'll take their Stirrings. Their hand's not that great. Opponent plays out their Tower, passing back. We draw a Snap. We'll play Delta. Opponent cycles their Sphere, making a green, cast out a Star into an Urza's Tower, and on their end step, we'll shock in a Hallowed Fountain and Thought Scour, drawing into a land. Draw another land for turn. We'll play land out and hold up Slitherwisp. Opponent casts out a map, cracks it right away, and grabs an Urza's Mine. Then they run it out. On their end step, we fetch Shock and cast out a Wisp. We draw a Consider for turn. We'll play Tarn and attack in for 3, holding up all of our instants. Opponent untaps, cast out a Karn, and we will cast our Subtlety, countering this. We draw a Watery Grave, and opponent puts it on the bottom. We draw a Giada for turn. We'll attack in for 6, and then we'll just hold up everything. We're getting to play a land drop, definitely on purpose. Opponent cracks a Star, making a green, then casts a Sylvan Scrying. They grab a Tower and play it, then cast out a Wormboil. On their end step, we cast out our Giada. Opponent's down to 9, and we draw a Grave. Then we cast Consider, milling over our Drown. We find a Drowned anyway, and a Leyline Binding on top. We draw a Binding, shock, and a Watery Grave. Then cast out our Leyline Binding, drawing into a Wisp. Opponent's down to 8, and then we take out Wormcoil Engine and attack in for lethal. So let's get on to sideboarding. We're going to take out 3 mutations, 2 Drown Lock, and a Dress Down for Geist of Saint Trap, Collective Brutality, Surgical, Shadow of Doubt, and a Flusterstorm. Game 3, our 7 has a Shadow of Doubt, so we'll keep. And opponent's on a mulligan to 6. They go turn 1 Star off of a tower. We go turn 1 Triome and drew a Hallowed Fountain. Opponent plays a Mine, passing. We draw a Snap and play out a Strand. Opponent plays out a tower into a map. Thank God they didn't have Tron. We draw a Swamp for turn. We'll play that out and hold up Shadow of Doubt. On the end step, they go for it. Let's Shadow of Doubt. Nice land. Opponent fails to find, and we draw a Leyline Binding. Opponent cracks Star for a green, plays out a Sphere, cracks that for a green, then plays out a Star. We draw a Castle Vantress and hold up all of our interaction. Opponent cracks Star for a green, then cast Sylvan Library, Snapcaster Shadow. Oh my God, this is the best day of my life. No land again for the opponent. Then they cast out a Haywire Might. Oh my, we drew the other one. We thought Sue's the opponent, and Karn's definitely the best card. Hopefully we can shadow them again. Play out Triome and attack in for 2. They block and they're back up to 22. Opponent plays out the map and does nothing else. We draw Subtlety for turn. We'll shock and Fountain. And on the end step, they go to crack map, and you know what's coming. We cast another Shadow of Doubt. Oh my goodness. Drawing into a Scalding Tarn. Opponent misses the land drop, and on the end step, we cast out our Giada. Drawing into a Delta for turn. We play Tarn and Fet, being a Leyline Binding on top. Attacking for 2. Opponent plays a Star, cycles it for a green, then casts out a Sylvan Scry, and we'll counter that with our Drown Lock. And then they run out of Forest. And on the end step, we will Scry, keeping a Forest Negation on top and putting Leyline Binding to the bottom. We draw our Forest and Leylines on top. We attack in for 2. Opponent casts a Karn the Great Creator. We will Subtlety this, and they put it to the bottom. On the end step, we flash out the Binding, clearing it from the top. We draw into a Slitherwisp, and our top card's a Snapcaster Mage, which means we can Shadow Doubt again. We attack in for 5. They're down to 13. Oh, an opponent scoops them up. Oh, I wanted to do it one more time. So really happy with the 3-2 with the new brew. I hope you guys enjoyed this league. Please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next video.